Iguala, gracias por seguir estos contenidos, pero te agradezco si le das suscribirte y a la manito, y si además quiere comentar, mucho mejor.
Hello, good evening. Today is September the 13th. It's 8:35 p.m. This is Sincericidio number 16, and we are joined with Mr. Abel Carvajal for another conversation. And I think today we have to start with the declaration of Mr. Romney that he says that he's too old to compete again for the Senate of Utah. And I think that he's full of BS, because basically I've talked to friends in Utah and they hate him because of his position against President Trump and because he is an awful rhino. But worst of all, he couldn't come up with a good candidacy against Mr. Obama, and he lost to that guy who by today nobody knows where he came from, and he's just a fraud. And this guy was the candidate and couldn't put up with a good offer to the American people, and now just another loser, and he wants to blame Trump from that. So hello, my friend, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So this is not unexpected news when we're talking about Mitt Romney, and his exit from the Senate next year. He announced that he's not going to run for re-election. It was very unlikely that he would have been nominated by the Utah Republican Party either way. He would have faced the voters, the Republicans of that state, and he would have very likely not made it through any primary. He would have lost the race there. So it wasn't unexpected. I did not think that Mitt Romney would serve as a senator past the 24 elections because of that reason. But it's interesting that he said that he's on his way out because he's 76, that Trump and Biden should step aside because of their age. And that's a weird thing for him to say, considering he ran for Senate in his 70s. For the first time. So no, Mitt Romney will always be remembered as the candidate who failed to get elected to the presidency in 2012. He had that election won. He could have won. He was leading in the polls until very late in that race. And he messed up an opportunity to make Obama a one-term president. He should have been a one-term president. And he ran a very lackluster campaign, and that's why he lost. And as a result, we have 4 more years of Obama. And what's interesting is, had Romney won in 2012, there probably would be no Donald Trump. So, if Romney hated Trump so much, the way he could have gotten rid of him is by actually winning, because there would not have been a primary in 2016. So there wouldn't have been an opportunity for Trump to have come into power until at least 2020, and I don't think he would have at that point in time. So Mitt Romney not only gave us 4 more years of Barack Obama, but he has himself to blame for Donald Trump coming to power by virtue of him losing in 2012.
Yeah, and the other thing is that not only his performance on that famous debate that he led this lady from CNN to shut his mouth when he was making his point, and he was basically a coward that day, and he couldn't come up with anything else. And the other thing that, made him worse was Chris Christie, the way he thanked Mr. Obama after the hurricane that hit New Jersey. And that was really terrible, but it was on Mr. Romney's responsibility to have lost that election, that the numbers were great for him, and he threw it away. They even won the Senate at that time. That's why McConnell could stop the designation of Merrick Garland, because they won the Senate. they won the Congress, and this guy couldn't win the presidency because he was just a coward, basically.
Well, what was interesting is that in middle of 2014, there was a poll conducted asking voters if Romney and Obama were running hypothetically in 2014's elections for the midterms. Romney would have beaten Obama by 10%. So there was a lot of buyer's remorse. Romney represents the past of the Republican Party. It's interesting that in 2008, there's a book of mine here somewhere. I don't know where exactly on the shelf it is, but the title is American Carnage by Tim Alberta. It's a very interesting book, and it talks about the Republican Party going from 2004 all the way to 2018, 19, the middle of the Trump administration, and the evolution of Romney in particular from this candidate who was the person that all the conservatives have galvanized behind in 2008. Because remember, McCain was leading, and McCain was hated by the right-wing base, but he still strung together enough support and enough money to win, because there was a Super Tuesday that year that was 30 states. And so McCain having the most resources helped him win. And Romney was the anti-McCain candidate initially. And a lot of these people like Laura Ingraham, Ann Coulter, Sean Hannity were very pro Mitt Romney at that point. They viewed him as the conservative, to the point where Laura Ingraham had once said, I might as well vote for for Hillary Clinton, who was also running for president that year. She lost to Obama in the Democratic primary. And she said, I'll vote for Hillary Clinton. She's more conservative than John McCain. So it's interesting how you go from Romney being the conservative hero. Then in 2010, you have the Tea Party. He falls out of favor with the base. In 2012, he's the establishment. He's the new McCain. And of course, when you lose an election, the base turns on you. And between the course of 2013, 2014, 2015, the Republican Party grew more and more frustrated. They were out of power, and they should have been in power. They should have been able to govern after 2012, and they didn't. They didn't win elections. And so the party got tired, the base got tired, and that's how Trump came in, little by little. And of course, Trump has eventually consolidated his hold within the party. He went from 28, 25, 28, 30% of the vote in some of these states, but because the opposition was so divided between Rubio and Cruz and Kasich and all these people, Trump was able to string together all these wins to the point where people in the party just said, well, Trump's the guy. He's won all these states. And so that's kind of how we've gotten to Trump. It's a long progression of ineptitude and failure that led to the Republican voters saying, okay, screw it, we're going to try something new. And that's where we're at right now with Trump. It's interesting to see where we're going to end up, because, Trump's got this one run in 24, and win or lose, he's done, right? So 2028, we have to choose a new direction, but that's 4 years from now. A lot can happen in 4 years, like what happened between 2012 and 2016.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that basically Romney run with all the regular talking points of the Republicans, and Mr. Trump was a disruptor. He really talked out of the box and without the political correctness, and he called the shots the way they were feeling it.
Right.
And I think it was important to talk about the immigration issue, the problem that the China was eating America's lunch, and because they, all the treaties that were done by the U.S. government, always the Americans lost. So basically with those two things, and the way that he said that he will give the money to the military and give the good rules of engagements to the regular commanders so they could fight the war in situ, not like they were running with Obama, that all the offensive operations were run from the White House. So with basically those four things and giving a good a good thank you speech to the veterans, he won the Republican nomination at that time.
Yeah, and the thing is, Romney, the Romney name begins with his dad. His dad ran for president in the 60s, and his dad was the governor of Michigan, if I remember correctly. And it was George Romney, and he lost to Nixon in 68, if I recall correctly, and in 64 he lost to Goldwater. But George Romney was this big patriarch from Michigan, to the point where that's where the Romney family's from. Ronna McDaniel, the current chair of the RNC, is former chair of the Michigan GOP. So the Romneys have a very rich legacy in Michigan. And it turns out that Romney lost Michigan by 10 against Obama in 2012, because he took some of the more traditional Republican views on economic issues. He took the very neoliberal approach on certain economic matters. With trade, for instance, Trump was a departure from that, because Trump went after these trade agreements, and that was very popular. So you have what were called the Reagan Democrats, who switched over for Trump. These are mostly blue collar workers, tend to have high school or some college education, and they have voted Republican in greater numbers because Trump changed the message. Whereas the realignment that was going on in 2012 and 2008 was that more affluent people, more college educated people who voted for Bush, people who voted for Dole, people who voted for Reagan, who voted Republican for generations, all of a sudden became Democrats. So we were losing people, and Trump's change of policy opened up the door for us to gain more people. Whether the change in strategy from winning over the suburban educated voters versus winning the blue collar workers is something that will net us more votes, I'm not sure. But it was a necessary change, because the college educated just weren't going to vote for a Republican, whether that was Rubio, whether that was Ted Cruz, because of the changes that we have seen in the last 10 years, since really 2008. And Trump was the first one who realized, well, I can do things differently. I have a different base. I have a different support group. And he turned Ohio and Iowa from swing states to Republican states. And Michigan, he won. Pennsylvania, he won. Wisconsin, he won in 2016.
And he won Arizona.
And Arizona. And Georgia and North Carolina, but more so the Midwest. And if he's going to win the presidency in 2024, he's got to win those states again, because some of the states that have moved away from us have been in the South, have been in places like Virginia, which have historically voted Republican until 2008. And that state's not coming back. Georgia, you can make an argument that it's going in a similar direction. Colorado, which was a state that Romney put a lot of effort and resources to go into, that state's not coming back. So these traditional Republican states in the South and in the West have moved away from us. And so we have to go into the Midwest. The electoral picture doesn't look very strong for us, because the Democrats have gone on the attack in more places than we have. And we haven't gone into places like the Midwest, the Northeast, where we can go to these blue collar folks and convince them to change sides the same way Democrats have gone into our terrain and convinced our people to change sides. So, things have to be done differently. It's all about getting a winning coalition and getting above 50%. And the way that you're going to get above 50% is by building a broad coalition. The Democrats' coalition is educated white voters, minorities, and women, typically. Republicans have to try to make inroads with those groups, try to win over Hispanics, which we have in greater numbers, try to win over African Americans, which we have in greater numbers, especially amongst young Black voters. That is where our growth has been. Win over Asians. Asians might be upset, for instance, about affirmative action because it hurts them, right? They're trying to apply to these universities, and they're told, these schools are saying, no, we have too many Asians. And that's obviously incredibly contradictory to everything this country stands for. That's wrong. And so Asian voters might come to our side because we've openly championed equality of opportunity, which means that the color of your skin should not dictate whether you can go to college or not, or to go to a specific college. And so we're starting to siphon away communities. The skill that the Republican Party has done is that in recent years, they've talked to Hispanic voters in Spanish. I think that's a slam dunk. You know, you have to try to reach the maximum amount of people possible with the message. And the way that you're going to do that's by talking to people in their language. Make it easy for them to vote for you. Make it hard for them to vote for the other person.
And talking about Asia, the other tough news that I've seen happening is that after the government gave this huge amount of money to the Iranians to do whatever they want, basically to put money on the nuclear program, the good news today is that the State Department approved the selling of F-35s to South Korea. And I think it was a slap in the face to Kim Jong-un after he went and make it funny with Putin. Yeah. And today it was a slap in the face because they say, you're gonna reunite with that Ukraine butcher? Well, we're gonna give you a little candy, and they are going to send the F-35s, and that is going to be a big changer.
Well, I'm disappointed that they're not F-16s going to Ukraine, but that's a whole nother discussion to have.
But the F-16 the problem with the F-16s is that they don't have the crews ready to fly. But I think by December, they will have enough pilots trained to do the fighting. Because the problem is not sending the planes. The problem is that if you don't have enough good qualified pilots, they might lose with a seasoned Air Force, the Russian Air Force. But the good news today is that the Russians has lost so many ships in the Black Sea, and they're not ready to patrol the way they wanted, and the Ukrainians took their raiders. And the other good news is that Turkey stopped the crossing of Russian Navy reinforcements to the Black Sea. So that's going to be very nice by the time the F-16 get into the show, I think.
Wow. That's good news. Yeah, I've heard today that the Ukrainians conducted raids on Sevastopol. To me, it seems that it is a matter of time before Ukraine does break through in the southern region and seizes Melitopol, which would open the door for the Ukrainians to launch a secondary assault across the Dnieper River and reach the borders of Crimea with Kherson Oblast. And that would enable the Ukrainians to give Russia an ultimatum: get out of Crimea, come to the table, and abandon it, and abandon this invasion, or we're going to go in and we're going to liberate the rest of our country. Because at that point, Crimea will become an island from Russia. It's a question of just getting rid of the Kerch Bridge, which Ukraine has already attacked. So it would give Zelensky a lot of leverage in any negotiation. And even if there's no negotiation, it would begin to set this timer by which Russia will collapse. Because if Crimea is under attack, or even if Crimea falls, that's the end of the war. That, you know, at the beginning of this war, people talked about, well, if Russia takes Kyiv, seizes the capital of Ukraine, it's over. Well, the reverse of that is if Ukraine seizes Crimea,
Sevastopol
especially, it's over. But, you know, Crimea is a major symbol to Russia, and this would be the end of the war. And also, there's reports that Ukrainians are attacking in the suburbs around Donetsk and are moving into the airport of Donetsk, which is the site of a very big battle when the whole separatist conflict broke out in 2014. In other words, to me, there is good news coming out of Ukraine. I think it's a worthwhile investment. Yes, it's been a lot of money that we've sent, but it's money going to a good cause. We are weakening one of America's second, I would argue, America's second biggest geopolitical adversary. And Russia's not a friend of ours. We shouldn't pretend that we're friends with Russia. You know, they're attacking a Western country. And I wish that more conservatives out there who've talked for many years about Western civilization and how it needs to be protected, that they would defend Western civilization, the cradle of the Orthodox religion, which is in Kyiv. It's the spiritual hub of the Orthodox world, that they would protect the Orthodox religion, the Orthodox Christianity, against a power that is invading from Eurasia, a Eurasian power that the mentality is we must expand as much as possible. That's not that is so counter to the idea of everything that we stand for in the West. And so a good conservative supports conserving, the way of life. And we cannot say that America's way of life is more in line with Russia than it is with Ukraine. It's wrong.
And the other thing is that even though Putin, one of the ideas of getting involved in Ukraine is because NATO was expanding. Well, you got what you wish for, because now the NATO expanded to Sweden, Finland, Ukraine, and it's more tough with Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and all those countries are getting more tougher, their defenses against the Russians, and now it's Moldavia and Poland. So he wanted to get rid of NATO. He got the worst part because he's just a thug. The thing is that the press is giving too much leeway to this. He was a spy, a thug, a killer, a regular jerk. He's not a smart guy. He's just a thug. And that's basically what he's been done. He's the richest politician in the world because he has stolen from everybody. But other than that, and having his country like semi-slavery, that's what the Russian people are. But it's just a joke. The thing is that there's so many liberal media that keep, giving the guy like he's a top-notch. He isn't.
So with regards to what's going on with NATO, I wish, we were talking about what was going on in the Baltics. Yeah. I wish that there was more commitment on the part of these countries in NATO, like Germany, like France, like those countries that are in the Baltics.
Well, France is receiving their sauce in the African region of Niger and Gabon and all those countries that used to be in the French hemisphere, and because they didn't want to play rough with Putin, now they're eating their lunch there in Africa. So take your chance. And the other thing that I didn't want to end this program is what is happening in Spain. And the news today that one of these guys, who's a top guy called Albice Perez, he said that when Sanchez went to visit the king at Zarzuela Palace, the guy said, well, you have to let me make the government and I'm going to give amnesty. And the king said, no amnesty, that violates the Constitution. And the guy tried to intimidate the king, and the king called the palace guard, the Guardia Real, the royal guard, and said, escort this guy and his friends to the gate. And they kick him out. So the things in Spain are getting nice because the king played. And the funny part is that nobody is negating what happened at Zarzuela Palace. And the king played. And he already told Sanchez, you come with the amnesty, and basically I'm going to F you.
Well, there's a role that the king is playing as the protector of Spanish democracy. That is exactly why he was...
Not a democracy, the Constitution, basically.
Well, yes, but the Constitution ensures a democratic system of government. And so he's protecting the constitutional order in a way that the founders of Spain looked for him. This was a role that they designed for the monarch of Spain, for the king, to be this force of stability in the country. In a country that, why did the Spanish Republic collapse? Because there was no structure in the Republic, right? The president was in there, elected through the parliamentary process, but there was no tradition of unification, no tradition of working together amongst the main parties of the left and the right, like in Germany. In Germany, you have the SPD and the CDU form government all the time because there's a consensus. In Spain, there was no consensus because you have communists and conservatives. They're never going to want to get
anarchists and against the conservatives. Basically.
Yeah. So, and liberals are also sprinkled in there. So you cannot have that type of system of government without somebody being a referee. And that's the role that the king plays in the Spanish system. Ideally, Spain would be a republic with an elected president, but ideally is not the world that we live in. And ideally is not the existence of Spanish tradition. Spain is an unstable democracy. It's evidenced by look at the last 10 years, look at the last 20 years. It's not a stable system that they have over there. They need somebody like the king to step in and play referee sometimes.
Well, the thing is that until our last conversation about 10 days ago, everybody was expecting the king to do something. And now it happened two things. First, the socialist of Felipe González, one of the oldest president, guy, he's playing and he's saying, we cannot twist the Constitution. And then Aznar appeared to yesterday and he's saying, we have to stop this coup against the Constitution. So the main socialist and the main right party are talking and they're coming, calling the people to go out and protest. But the last thing is that the king played and, probably guys from the Royal Guard told this guy, Albice Perez, who is a 1.5 million people followers in Telegram, and he's the guy who threw it out. So the game is getting very nice, and we hope for the sake of so many families that we have in Spain that they fix the problem, because letting the enemies of the country that are the separatist Basques and the Catalonians is going to be terrible for Spain, and especially because Spain plays a big deal in Hispanic American countries, and that's why people,
it's the motherland, la madre patria,
of course. So I wanted to thank you for this conversation, and we hope we meet again next week. And what else can you say?
Well, thank you very much for having me. We'll meet next week. Hopefully we'll have some more news when we get there. And in 2 weeks from today, we have the Republican presidential debate on September 27th. So that will be very interesting.
That will be great. And the last thing is that today, the main bosses of the artificial intelligence companies, they reunite with the Congress in closed session.
Interesting.
And Mr. Elon Musk said that they need a referee for artificial intelligence, and but he said that Congress is not ready for that.
I don't believe they are.
Well, but that's what he said today. So that was the nice part. So see you next time, my friend. Have a great day.
We'll talk next time.
Bye-bye.
Bollito de corazón a 2.500 el paquete, hallacas de pollo a 2.500 cada una, a la orden los bollitos de mazorca a 2.500 el paquete, bollito de corazón.